Chapter 6. The light slants across Rosa's picture. She has that funny little smile on her face. A smile that somehow conveyed, perhaps I shouldn't smile. Perhaps you think it's inappropriate to smile, but I'll smile anyway. Her smile was an act of defiance all her own. The picture is marked December 1942. I was 15 then. It was taken a few weeks after I met Rosa. It took me that long to work up the courage to ask her permission to take her picture. I remember our first meeting so well, and find myself smiling even in this squalor, surrounded by death. All I knew by November of that year was work. Work and somehow getting enough food to stay alive. The earlier years, in Frankfurt, which we thought so awful then, seemed like a glorious dream. Mother and father tried everything to balance our diet so we wouldn't get scurvy or beriberi or any other disease brought on by lack of vitamins. We also had to worry about tuberculosis, typhoid, typhus, and spotted fever. Typhus was spread by lice, and lice were everywhere in the ghetto. It was impossible not to have lice. The question was, how many? Keeping clean was just as important in avoiding disease as eating. Every night before going to bed, Mother would insist that we each go through our clothes and clean the lice from them. They congregated in the seams. We would crush the lice and then make sure that we killed the eggs, too. There was no water for baths, so we could wash only in the sink. Also, we either had very little soap, which we used for dishes, or no soap at all. If we didn't kill the lice every night, they would multiply horribly. One evening, as Father and Mother and I were delousing our clothes, and I was sitting in only my underwear, Erica burst into the room with a friend. She was so excited about introducing her new friend that at first she didn't notice what we were doing. Fortunately, Father still had his pants on, Mother her slip. I, who am naturally very white-skinned, was beet red in about 2 seconds flat. "Mama, Papa, Daniel, I have a friend you just have to meet," Erica babbled. "We work together at the factory, and she has started a youth group, and she says I can attend even though I'm younger than everyone else." Well, I don't think I'd ever heard Erica say so much all at once in her entire life. Still, that wasn't my main concern at the moment. 2 emotions were vying for dominance: shame and love. The shame was natural. Not many 15-year-olds like to be caught in their underwear picking lice out of their clothes. Love? Well, that I can't explain. She was actually a little funny looking. She had bright red hair and pale skin with freckles and bright blue eyes and rather thin lips. But she was smiling. She was beaming. She was delighted to meet us. She shook all our hands, including mine, as if what she was witnessing were the most natural thing in the world. And then, speaking in German, she said to me, "I used to watch monkeys at the zoo do this and think it was funny. Maybe God is watching us and thinks this is funny too." She was still smiling, and yet I couldn't tell whether she was joking or not. "I'm sorry," she said. "I've come at a bad time. But it was so nice to meet you all. Erica, please do bring your brother to the meeting." And she was gone. I sat there staring after her for so long that I came out of my trance only when it registered that everyone was laughing at me. It was the first time I had seen Mother or Father or Erica laugh since that terrible September a few months earlier. Just for that, I will be grateful to Rosa forever. In fact, they couldn't stop laughing. Mother was crying, she laughed so hard. "I don't see what is so funny," I objected. "Erica brings home a friend and humiliates us, and all you can do is laugh." That set them off again. The more indignant I became, the harder they laughed. I didn't join in. I pretended to concentrate on the lice. But all I could think of was Rosa. Very casually, after they had finally calmed down, I said to Erica, "When is this meeting Rosa mentioned? I might want to go." And that started them all up again. Honestly, I smile a little now, thinking of it. I certainly was love-struck. One look and I became moon-eyed. I wanted to find out everything about her, but I knew if I asked anything more, my family would only tease me, so I waited. She was probably from Poland, because she spoke to us in German, with lots of Yiddish words and phrases thrown in. Most Polish people, of course, spoke Polish to each other. Still, many of the Polish Jews also spoke both Yiddish and German. I had never learned Yiddish, but it was close enough to German that I picked it up quickly and used it at work. Father was the least proficient, but we all managed to get by. But that's all I knew about her, and that, for some reason, she could still smile. Maybe she was crazy. That was a possibility, of course. I wanted to find out. The first meeting I went to was 2 evenings later. It was in a small one-room house about 4 blocks over from our apartment house. Friedrich also came along. He was still living in the apartment where he had lived with his mother, along with a rabbi from Lodz who needed a place to stay. He could have moved in with us, and he came up to see us every night. But he didn't want to leave his apartment. Perhaps he felt that to leave was to somehow desert his family. To leave was to finally admit that they were all dead. We hoped that after a time he would begin to accept what had happened and come to live with us. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the room was, of course, Rosa. The second was shelves full of books. The ghetto had a lending library that I went to often, as I loved to read. But this was different. I looked at the titles. They had novels by Thomas Mann and plays by Bertolt Brecht, both banned authors and almost impossible to get hold of. I felt like I had entered a fantasy land. Rosa came up behind me. "They're real, all right. Go on, take one. You can borrow it, bring it back next time, then borrow another." I took The Magic Mountain off the shelf. Rosa grinned. "I think you'll like it, although any mention of food is a painful reminder. It's hard to imagine, isn't it?" she continued, "that somewhere in the world people are going about their lives, eating, sleeping, laughing, crying." She paused and looked right into my eyes. "Falling in love?" I gazed back at her. Had I heard her correctly? Did she mean anything by it? Then she flashed me a grin, which she followed with a wink. I was so confused that I didn't know what to say or how to respond. Was she being romantic? Was she teasing? Was it both? I think my face was bright red again. She was probably expecting some witty reply from me. "Daniel?" When I spoke, my voice cracked. "Hard to imagine," I replied like a dummy. "Come and sit down," she said, and under her breath she muttered, "before you fall down." Quickly, she introduced Erica, Friedrich, and me to the rest of the group. There were 7 others there, 4 girls, 3 boys. They were in the midst of an intense discussion about the different jobs the Jews had to do to keep the ghetto from falling into chaos. Administering the food, healthcare, housing, and, of course, police work. "If the Jews refused to do these jobs," a young girl said, "I wonder what would happen." "I often wondered too," Rosa said. "Just imagine if we all got together and turned against the Nazis. Why can't people realize that this system only prolongs our suffering? We are a forced labor camp. But in the end, we will all still die, and in the meantime, we will have helped the Germans. Look at all the uniforms and equipment we are making for the German war machine." And then I heard Erica's voice. I couldn't believe that she would speak up in this group of strangers. "But maybe if we can hold out long enough, the war will end before they have a chance to kill us." At that, everyone fell silent for a moment, because Erica had expressed the central principle that kept the ghetto going. Kept us all in that struggle when it would have been easier to give up. That principle was hope. "Hope," Rosa said angrily. "Hope is our enemy. We should give up hope, grab their guns, fight, and die proudly." "Only a person who is full of hope could say such a thing," I said softly. She turned her head and looked at me, looked me right in the eye. Again, I could feel my face burning. Then she winked at me and said, "I suppose we all hope for certain things, Daniel, but I don't think you should admit what it is you hope for." Everyone in the room burst out laughing at that. Was it her mission in life to embarrass me? And yet I'd gladly let her do it over and over, as long as she was noticing me. It was moments like that which made you want to stay alive, at any cost.